Hello, I am Tracy Otsuka, your host. Welcome back to ADHD for Smartass Women. My mission, well, you know it, it's to show you who you are and inspire you to be it. After meeting thousands of ADHD women, I can say with confidence that every single one of them is brilliant at something. There are no exceptions. So, of course, I am just delighted to introduce you to Vickie Howell. Vickie Howell is a creative force who's been leading the modern craft movement for over 20 years. You probably know her as the host of Nitty Gritty on HGTV or from her work on PBS, YouTube, best-selling books, and live events. She's the founder of Stitchwell Social Club, and her latest book, No Needle Knitting, drops this October. Whether she's behind a camera, on a stage, or leading a yarn-fueled movement, Vickie's all about making things that matter. For her, fiber arts weren't just a hobby or a career. They were a way to calm her antsiness and channel big creative energy into something real. Welcome, Vickie. Did I get all of that right?
It sounded great to me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to meet you and be here with the tribe. I can feel it.
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to have you here as well. In fact, I have been trying since the beginning of the podcast, so for at least 5 years, to get someone to come on and talk about knitting, crocheting, handiwork, and what it does to our brain. But before we go there, I always want to talk about your ADHD story. It's a way to connect you to our audience. So, can we start there?
We can. It all started with a meme, actually. I'm 51 and I was actually just diagnosed a few months ago. My therapist would say that she diagnosed me a year ago, but I thought that it was just another person who didn't understand me. We've all been there. I'm like, no, you just don't get me. And then, a year goes by and I get this meme from a childhood friend, my friend Sasha. In the way that like only people that have known you since you were 9 like can send you things and you're like, okay, my people now don't know me the same way. They know a different me in some ways. So there was a meme that she sent and it was from a Dr. Nicole Chatwin, I think, a therapist, an ADHD therapist in California. And the meme, she sent it to me and another friend. There was 3 of us. And it said, if you were in the gifted and talented program in the 90s, or the 80s for me, how's your undiagnosed ADHD, high functioning anxiety, perfectionist-based procrastination going? And I was like, haha, that's funny. And I kind of thought she was maybe talking about some conversations that we'd had about what she was exploring for herself or whatever. And I didn't think anything of it. And so, and the 3 of us had been in this, like in California, it's called GATE, this GATE program when we were in elementary school together. So that was the context for that. And so moved on. A couple days later, something was going on. And my youngest, who has been diagnosed with ADHD and is a biological female,
Okay.
says to me, well, Mom, you probably have a little bit of the ADHD. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, why do people keep saying this? And my husband, Dave, was like, a little bit. And I was like, what the hell? Said it a different way in my house. So I texted my friend back and I was like, oh, you're going to love this. This happened. Sasha's response was shocker with 3 exclamation points. And I just was like, I don't understand what you're saying. I mean, I've written a bunch of books. I finish things that I start. I don't have an issue with time. Like, I do big things. I was like, I don't understand. And I don't present like the people that I know, mostly male, but not all, who have ADHD. And I'm also a child of the 80s, 70s, and 80s, where when we were kids, it looked very different when you had that diagnosis. Well, girls were ignored completely. And so I really didn't understand, but it's like if that many people are saying it, the universe is like, okay, all right, like, lady. I started researching and reading, and I came across, amongst other things, your book. And it wasn't even reading it, it was literally reading the like audible description. There was a couple things that blew my mind. Well, there were a few, and I'm not sure which were there or which were in the actual book. But one of the big things, well, there was a couple big things that high achieving and hyperthinking are forms of hyperactivity. And that sucker punched me. sucker punched me. The whole situation, there was another, and this was not from your book, this was from the interweb somewhere, that said women may develop strategies to hide their symptoms, which can make it look like they are very organized or an overachiever. And I just slowly started getting more and more naked. Like I was like, oh. And then, more empathetic, able to feel other people's feelings. I have said that since I was a child. I can put my hand on someone, I can be in the same room, and people have always kind of brushed that off as being woo woo, which is a whole other subject. Like, people don't believe that women have this intuition anyway. And my husband is very linear thinking. And when I read that, I walked downstairs and I read that to him and I said, how many years have I been saying that I can feel other people's feelings? And he looked at me and he said, all of them. But it never really, because he's a linear thinker, he's cynical. He doesn't necessarily believe things that he can't see. And so there was this has sort of opened up this conversation. So, there was a ton more where I just started checking things off, like more intuitive. Another one was trying to fit in all the time, but inherently needing to stand out.
Yep.
Like at the same time. I mean, it was just like one thing after another. Our creative brains notice everything. And it really sucker punched me because I'm 51 years old. I also consider myself pretty self-aware. I mean, I've had therapists on and off since I was 19. I'm looking at anything from like astrology to neuroscience. Like, I'm always trying to look within and see. And I really sort of pride myself in being able to see things in others that people might be struggling with, or it might be a gift. And so for me to not see this about myself really took me out. It made me think, like, what else am I missing? I asked my husband, am I actually a man? Like, what else am I missing? Like, what other huge things? Because my identity is completely different, which sounds dramatic, but for me, it's like looking at myself from a completely different window. Like if myself is my house and one that I didn't even know was there.
So, can I ask you, you mentioned that, you had been working with a therapist, you had done all the things. Was that because you were struggling with something else besides ADHD and you didn't know it was ADHD?
Yeah, well, this is the what comes first thing, right? So, as my child, Clover, said to me, like, Mom, women were often misdiagnosed because there wasn't research done. And I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I mean, ish. Like, it was my GP, and I kind of just like thought I did and whatever. And I might have comorbidities. It's very possible. Look, I'm a Gen Xer. We were all raised on hose water and neglect. You know what it is? It's like we all have shit, right? And so part of that is, yeah, I struggled a little bit, but I just thought it was because there was a lot of things in my childhood. It was very chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
I did have love. There was a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Not feeling safe.
Not feeling safe. And I was a very, very much, and still am, but an overthinker. I was always just like, fuck, and I didn't know. Nobody knew. And when you're quiet.
Okay, so tell me what you were like as a child. Like if I would have been observing you in grade school, what would Vickie have looked like or behaved like?
I think the younger years, I was shy but talkative, if that makes sense. Like once I was comfortable with you, talkative. Really liked school. Obviously smart, but different. We moved when I was 9 from Colorado to California, so I felt even more different because that's a big culture shock. And, when I was in 4th grade, my teacher saw something in me and kept sending me to go test for the Gifted and Talented program, and I kept not passing. And so she would send me back. She's like, there's something there. Like, you are, like, the way that you think, like, there's something there. And so I finally went back, and the teachers, and it was mostly the math stuff, to be honest with you. The test giver said to me, and I still remember this, he said, I don't know, I'm looking at these numbers, and it's not a pass, but I'm listening to you, and I really think you need to be in this program.
Mm.
And that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And nobody knew back then. And when there's chaos in your family, they're not paying attention to those kind of things.
Right.
And as I got older, I did less well in school. I was in honors English remedial math. Well, that should be another sign.
Right.
But I didn't know that. I didn't know that until an adult friend said to me who grew up with me, was like, "Isn't it weird that nobody noticed this and this? Like obviously something's wrong." And it had never occurred to me. It
Yeah.
never occurred to me. As I got older, I got more outgoing. I was involved with a lot. I had friends. I did a lot of things, but I always felt different. I always felt like I was the one that didn't fit in, and I was trying to fit in. And this same friend who sent me this meme, 30 years later, I remember us being in high school and her saying to me, "Vickie, why are you always trying to be different?" And I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean I'm always trying to fit in?" And so all of these dots in the way that I'm now learning the ADHD brain like consumes information are starting to come together. All that floating, visual of glitter or whatever it is, they're starting to sort of amalgamate.
Did you struggle with social issues? I know that you said you always felt like you were trying to fit in and there was something not quite right, but were you good at, the girl stuff and making friends and keeping friends and
Yeah, I think I have always been good at making friends and keeping friends. But a lot of that is because for much of my life I've been a people pleaser.
ah,
I mean, I was in the quote unquote popular crowd as a younger person, and I never felt like I belonged. I never felt all that comfortable,
mhm.
but I didn't have the self-confidence to. And that doesn't mean that I couldn't have been comfortable around them. I could have maybe acted differently or been differently, and I don't know if I would have been accepted or not. I don't know that. But a couple of those people are still in my life, 30 years later. So, and I've always, my like special sauce, I think we all have it, I think is that human connection. And so that is a focus and that is an interest, which was the other thing that sort of like knocked me off my chair when because I don't retain information. That's why the fact that you're an attorney blows my whole mind, because the amount of focus and study that you need for that much traditional schooling, that's got to be so hard. Which just blew me away was when I read the line that said, your brain is wired for interests and ideas, not for information. And I threw my hands up, literally threw my hands up, and I was like, there I am.
Yeah.
There I am.
What you're making me realize even more is I just had this experience where I had to record a bunch of trainings for a corporation that is then selling it to other corporations, not specifically on ADHD, but things like procrastination, really leaning into your strengths. What am I supposed to do with my life? All that kind of stuff. And I did brilliantly at everything that was scripted and I'd been working on with them, with their producers since January, no problem at all. I did so well that when I was there, they said to me, "You know what? Will you do an impromptu thing for me? For us, it's going to be all about how to make ADHD work for you." And I'm thinking, I wrote a book on ADHD. I've had 300 and I don't know how many, podcasts on ADHD. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. You don't have a working memory. Don't do that. But I'm thinking, well, I know this stuff. So it was 10 prompts. This is the kicker, though. They could only be a minute to 2 minutes each. They needed a beginning, a middle, and an end. I have never been so mortified at myself. I felt like I was a plane. And just when I got off the runway and started climbing, they'd shut me down and I'd have to move on to the next one. And I could not remember what the hell I was talking about. It was so bad. You were talking about being an attorney and how difficult it must be to just learn all this information and retain it. I think I was a lot better then at it. And as I've gotten older, perimenopause, all that stuff, we know estrogen modulates dopamine. It's gone to hell. And so I've always thought, you know what? I should have a cooking show. And this is what's going to lead into you, because I'm great at that. Because what I'm doing, I'm adding the ingredients in, I'm talking about, it's all prompting each other. There is nothing to memorize because I'm doing it as I'm talking about it. What I'm thinking about, you are in the perfect role because you're doing while you're talking, right? So you don't need to memorize anything.
This is just to speak to, what you say in your book and what, is now known. Like, it's a spectrum, like everything else. It's a spectrum from empath to autism, I've noticed. And you and I have the exact opposite thing. So for me, I am 175% more confident and comfortable with improving. It comes to me than I am with memorizing anything or with a teleprompter.
So I just want to understand, are you saying that you can't use a teleprompter?
No. And I have a story for this that
Okay, I'm fascinated. Go.
I did all of this research and then I talked to my therapist and I was like, hey, you might have had a point. Like I read this stuff and I didn't know that it presented differently for women and all the things. And I made an appointment with a nurse practitioner so that we could adjust because I've been on medication for 27 years for anxiety and depression. Like, is
Yeah.
it the wrong one? TBD. I'm new on this journey.
Right.
But so I'm doing all the things and finding out all the things. And even she was the nurse practitioner, who's also a therapist that specializes, was fascinated by this. So when I got my first gig, Nitty Gritty, it was for DIY Network, also on HGTV. The producer, and this is a big studio shoot in California, the producer, so 3-camera shoot. The executive producer did not want me to have a teleprompter. That was my first on-camera gig, TV. This is 20 something years ago. And I had worked in the entertainment industry before, but on the other side of the camera. And so I was just like, oh, all right, all right. And so for me, if I can bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, go with nobody talking, I can do it.
So do you have to have the bullet points there, or you just have to look at them before and you can remember?
Right before.
And you can remember.
Well, I could then when I was 30.
Yeah, I could have at 32.
Now I lose people's names.
Oh, yeah, like my kids even.
Side note again, just the other day I was at a bar with my friend Ray. I was going up because I was going to buy that round. The bartender's like, okay, what name is it under? And my friend Ray had bought the first round. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to put a new card. Right, but I'll look up so I can switch cards. Like, who put it on? And it completely escaped me. Usually I can bullshit my way through it a little bit. It was weird. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure who it was put under. Like, I was with a group of people. I was with one woman who I know very well. And I said, let's just put it on a new one. I completely lost it.
Yeah.
So that was a very long way of saying, I don't know. I think I can still do it because I still do live videos all the time, but live videos are so different because you can do like what we're doing right now and be real and bumble and say things and whatever. So I could do that. That was sort of how, and that doesn't mean that I did it on one take every time, but I often did. It was something because it's almost like it would just start cycling. The last couple months, I was supposed to do something. I wanted to do a promotion for Stitchwell Social Club, this new community that I've started. And I thought, so on Instagram, like you can't promote a reel if it's over a certain amount of time. So I had to make sure that it had to be, whatever it was. I can't remember what it was at the 3 minutes, I think. And so I was like, okay, well, I better not improv because and so I wrote it out and I was like, I'm going to try one of those teleprompter apps. Like, let's just do it. Like, let's just experiment. So I did that and it was like, oh my God, why is it going so slow? It started at 50%. So I upped it to 60, still too slow. Still like I was just staring at the camera, 70, 80, 90, 100%. And it was barely fast enough. It couldn't keep up with me. So what I found out in that minute that I did not know for my entire life is that I grasp information like in lightning speed. I just don't keep it. So it's a very specific skill. And I had told the therapist about that and she said, I think I might use that as a tool for people to recognize. The teleprompter, I had already said it and the teleprompter wasn't moving. I was ready for the next thing. And so I had to have it move faster and then faster and then because I got it. And so it was in my head, even if it wasn't coming out yet. I was ready for the next thing. It's almost like there's like it's on deck.
Yes. And if you miss it, then it's gone.
Right. And I was just stalled there and I couldn't understand. And so that was so eye-opening to me because I've noticed, like, if you hand your spouse your phone to read something or whatever, you're like, clap, clap, like, let's go. Like, why is it taking you so long? And I didn't realize that that's because I grasp things so quickly. I am not going to remember what it said 5 minutes later. But in that moment, for that conversation, I can. But if I had not had this random app for this random thing, I never would have known that. And it helps me understand why certain times in conversation, people are like, wait a minute, what? Like, slow down. Like why they can't keep up.
So when you're saying you can't use a teleprompter, you're not talking about professionally using a teleprompter where they've got someone there
Right.
watching your speed and moving it for you. Or do you know there's a teleprompter app that there's a pedal and you can pedal to slow it down or to speed it up?
Yeah, but I maxed out the speed is what I'm saying to you. And what I should say, what I thank you, Tracy, for bringing that up, is for my PBS show, they did use a teleprompter, but I had an operator, and so I never knew. You want it faster? You want it faster? But I never knew that that wasn't anything more than like, I got this.
And so your friends have never told you, Vickie, you talk so
Oh
fast.
yeah, no, for sure. But that's different than grabbing the information. Than
I see what you're saying.
I'm grabbing the information and then regurgitating it.
Got it. Yeah, and I mean, I think that is part of our issue with an ADHD brain is we've got it and then that's why we interrupt too, right? Because if we don't say it right then, it's going to be gone and we're going to forget.
I know, and then you realize, well, that was kinda jerky, like, you need to let people have their space, and but that's what it is it's not even that, it's like, it is that, but also you get excited. Like, if you're invested, you get
Yes.
excited. Okay, so now we're back to our interest brain, and so that means that we have ideas, like, we can see not A, B, C, D, we can see all of the syllables and all of the sounds and the inflections.
The whole alphabet coming in at one time.
Right,
So,
right.
Vickie, what has changed for you since you were diagnosed?
So, well, first off, my you know, dearest friend, soul sister, Tammy had said to me, because I was struggling with it at first, because it was such a,
Mm,
when you get into your 40s and 50s, you get to a place where you care less about other people's opinions, and you also feel more confident in who you are.
yeah.
So, for me to find out something that felt profoundly different than how I saw myself at this age, it felt like the rug being pulled out from under my feet. So my dear friend Tammy said to me, Vickie, I think that you need to give yourself some time to mourn who you thought you were. And I said, okay, but I'm me, so I'm going to take action at the same time. And she was like, okay, I'll allow it. And I did that. And then after that, at the same time, I told my mom that I was reading this book, and she immediately ordered it for herself. She was a teacher and ironically, a special education teacher, and she never knew any of. She said, I didn't know that girls presented this way. Her specialty was autism, but still, like I didn't know. And so if my mom, who was a teacher for 44 years and had a master's in special education, didn't have this information, how were all these young girls and young women supposed to be seen? But now, much like with menopause, thanks to all the Gen Xers again who are like, oh, hell no, I think people are going to be seen. And also that, yeah, like technically it's a disability, it's on the ADA, and that was a real hard one for me to swallow,
Mm,
because my whole identity is being capable and
mhm.
being able to do everything on my own.
Better than most people?
Yep. And so to be the person that might need was real hard. But then my mom was reading it, and she said, the more I'm reading this, the more I'm excited for you and what you'll be able to do now. I feel like maybe it's the Rosetta Stone for me. Now that I know that I can build businesses and have huge ideas, but getting that like parking ticket paid will take me down,
Yeah.
or knowing, like looking at my bank account, now that I know, I don't need to spend the energy and time fighting it. There's an app for that that's got visuals and prompts. I can do that. I can barter with my husband because, I do have a little bit of an ego, so I'm not going to just ask him for it. Hey, I've got this skill set. I'll do this. Will you go ahead and put my sticker on my car, for my registration, because otherwise I forget it's sitting on the dashboard. I forget until I'm sitting in the car.
Yeah.
Will you just do that? And I will handle getting all the family's dental appointments set up.
Oh my God, that would be the worst one for me.
This was me bartering it was the interest though, because it had been on my list for 6 months. But I looked at it and I was like, I can take that. That was to save face for me. That was kind of a long answer, but I think for me, this has felt like the real closing of a circle. I had some health stuff a couple years ago. I had a hysterectomy. I shut down a business a year ago. There's a lot of like closing of chapters, and this felt like the final one. And now I feel validated and excited about how I might be able to use it for that thing that I said is my special sauce, for that human connection, for that making a difference is so important to me. And I happen to use, knitting and crochet as an entryway to talk to people about some of this stuff. It may not have been ADHD before, but it absolutely was mental health. It absolutely was some of the symptoms. We didn't label it, but I just use yarn as an entry point for conversation.
Looking back, do you think your ADHD was at least partly responsible for you first picking up knitting or crocheting or any of this, handiwork?
So the answer is absolutely. I didn't know at the time. So I learned how to crochet when I was 8. I think at the time, I remember sitting in front of episodes of MASH and my mom teaching me how to crochet a granny square.
Hmm.
But I also have this memory of I used to bounce like on the couch, like back and forth. Okay. Like, so that was happening, and this seemed to calm that a little bit. And we didn't know any of the things. Like, I would go out and sit on a swing, and that would calm me too, like that little bit of movement. So I think the movement of my hands calmed me, and we didn't necessarily know that. And we did a lot of stuff. We did hand sewing and embroidery and cross stitch and whatever. Knitting though was really difficult. The dexterity of it just didn't click for me, and I didn't like it at all, ironically. But when I was 28 years old, I was pregnant with my second son. And so I had my first son who was a toddler. And before I was pregnant with my oldest, Tanner, I had worked in the entertainment industry, and it's kind of like a fast-paced industry. And so to go from that, and I got laid off when I was pregnant and then just decided, that I wanted to stay home with the kids. That is such a profoundly different space to be emotionally, mentally, literally, physically, to go from sort of like busy, high powered, not that I had a lot of power, but in that environment, I'm in my 20s, to sitting at a park with a child while you're pregnant with another one. It drove me mad. Just sitting, watching him play or playing with him. And I hated that. I hated that. And I saw all these other moms just like chilling, laying back on the bench, perfectly content for hours. And I was like, I can do this for 30 minutes and it's going to be a long 30 minutes.
I always say I'm not a sandbox mom. So I can relate to that, right? Just sitting there doing nothing.
That's a really hard one for me to admit, and I don't know why.
Oh, it wasn't for me though, because there's so many other things that I did so well with my kids where the sandbox moms would just not get it, right? Like being present for them and, okay, how do you feel? And I bet you're like that too.
I am. No, I'm a damn good mom. I can say that. I took up knitting when I was pregnant with my second son, and I was 28 then. And it ended up that I had to go on bed rest. And so I would have lost my mind. And so that's when it started. And for me, I was sort of drugged by my hair because I had this sort of same like granny preconceived notions that unfortunately people still have about really anything that is considered women's work.
Yeah.
But a friend said, "You're the craftiest person I know. Why aren't you knitting?" So this would have been, in about 2002. There was a resurgent. It was sort of like the reclaiming the craft at that point. And so she took me down to, there's a shop, La Knitterie Parisienne in Studio City. And I walked in, and first of all, I'd grown up with Michael's and Joann's. Joann's, RIP, they're gone now. Didn't realize that there were all these amazing fibers. But the other thing that I didn't realize, and again, I'd come from an industry that was not traditionally all that supportive when it came to women. And I don't mean the industry, it was obviously not, but women within the industry weren't supportive of each other. And I did not expect that as a young woman. I started working in the entertainment industry at 19. I didn't expect or understand that. So when I walk into this yarn store, And there's this table of women that are directors in the industry, attorneys, wives, grandmothers, this whole spectrum of women. And they were sitting there having positive, interactions, knitting, conversation. I thought, this is it. Like, this is the entryway to human connection. And I think that's why I mean, I love all, obviously, I love all fiber crafts. I love sewing. I love, all of it. But for me, it's always about this opens doors. Like, where else? Where else? For instance, with Stitchwell Social Club, my community, I have a neurologist who I want to talk to you about in a second. I have an art teacher. I have retired teachers. I have attorneys. I have all walks of, right now, mostly women. I'm hoping to grow it to all genders. It's a powerhouse of information, of resources for any number of things, but also supporting one another. How else do you get that if you don't have something that's completely considered sort of benign and non threatening to open that door? To me, that's what's exciting. And that started this career. And I didn't realize until I was being diagnosed, I was being asked questions, do you forget things a lot at work? I work for myself, so I can't really answer that. Oh, well, at meetings, are you unable to focus on them? Well, I mean, I'm usually running the meeting, so I can't really answer that. And it was a series of those questions. And she said, you've created a safe space for yourself, a safe space career. And it wasn't until then it just like my eyes opened and I said, yeah, I guess I have.
So, how do you explain the science of fiber crafts to someone who still thinks, oh, it's just a cute hobby for women? Because we know there is science behind why it makes us feel good.
I'll answer your question. My knee jerk reaction to that question, because I do get a lot of pats on my head. Oh, my Nana does that. Back then, is that, oh, yeah, I've had 4 TV shows and written 15 books and like owned two, it was that. And you get a complete, like almost head whip around where you can see the person it processing that it is not just woman's work, that it is a legitimate career. I know that is not the question that you asked, but that is the answer I often give, especially if it seems like they're looking down their nose at this.
Well, the thing about it, though, is because that was your area of interest, right?
For sure. For sure. But it's often minimalized because it's women's work. But my answer now, and what I'm hoping to explore, and what I think a lot of my next chapter is going to be about, is about the benefits of fiber crafting, or really any repetitive hobby and craft,
Mm-hmm.
for both mental and neurological help. So I'm at the beginnings of this next chapter, right? And I'm hoping that you'll step into some of it with me in the future, because I would love to talk more with you about that. But my ears perked up when I heard, of course, that you knit and crochet and I believe sew.
Let me disclose this. So, I grew up with a mother who was as crafty as they come. The sweaters my mother knitted, I don't know how she did it. So I was, as a small child, probably 7, I started crocheting kind of at her knee, and like your mom and you, we would watch reruns of Perry Mason.
It's solitude.
And I got so good at crocheting that I danced ballet, and I just started this little business where I would do snoods and shawls and leg warmers and whatever you could need. That's when I learned how to knit. I did knit a sweater for a boyfriend.
Oh, I still have not done that.
One of the arms was way longer than the other one. The same thing as you. When my son was born, I still remember it was like an olive green. I started knitting him a sweater. Same reason you did. So there would always be something to do to keep myself busy. But Vicki, I can't remember how to do any of that. And I had been asking my mother, could we join one of, like what you were just saying? Could we go into a knit? Because we have a couple in town. Could we go there together and I could relearn how to do it? And it's something I really, really want to learn how to do again, because I have a feeling it's like riding a bike. And I look at how skilled my mother was at this. So I know genetically.
Yeah. Well, and now you're clearly interested again. It's that you're interested again that it'll come back.
The problem is time, right? And
100%.
you are so brilliant that you've made this thing that you love so much into a career. Versus for me, it would be okay, can I make time for a hobby? So that's what I'm going to say.
So,
I don't want to be a fraud. I tend to start and then I don't finish. So I buy all the yarn.
but what's wrong with that? That's another thing. That's another sort of misconception for me. People always get embarrassed that I have so many unfinished. I have so many I didn't. And for me, it's like, but did it bring you joy getting the yarn and starting it? Maybe that's what brings you joy.
Oh, it's always that.
Wrap up the supplies and release them. Give them away then. Sell them if you need to, whatever. Like, we are so hard on ourselves as women about we didn't do enough. We're not doing enough. We didn't complete it. It's just knitting and crochet, people. Like, let it be what it is. But so that's okay. It's okay if you're working on something forever, which you probably won't because it'll get boring, but that's okay. And so you might actually find that when you're flying to, speak, just having it on the plane will help that plane ride go better while you're also listening to a podcast or watching a movie. You have to have more than one modality going on.
Well, and you can't do that, right? But did my mother do it where, oh my God, all of those, like you have to pay attention.
I don't like that kind of knitting though. I like how it looks. For me, that doesn't work with my brain. I like simple but clever. Like just enough stitch definition or like interesting techniques to keep me interested, but it being fast and simple so that I have, I can see it becoming something before my eyes and I can work on it while I'm talking or watching a movie or whatever, hanging out with the family, and only have to look down every once in a while.
Okay, so let's go back because I want to make sure we talk about the science because that'll encourage and interest more women who already have an interest in this to really take it on.
Absolutely. So, Tracy, there hasn't been a ton of specific work for ADHD yet done in this genre. However, for mental health, there has been. There's an organization called Craft Yarn Council that years ago did an entire initiative based around mental health. And then, therapists talk about it a lot, but specifically, I mentioned earlier, there's a neurologist in the Stitchwell Social Club community. And her name is Dr. Nicole Clark, and she is a fellow of she's a fellow at the American Academy of Neurology. And I asked her, I reached out, also a knitter and or a crocheter. And I asked her, I said, I would love a little bit of the science. And I'm not going to start quoting numbers for you because that's not what this conversation was about. But what I found interesting, and because we already talked about the retaining of information plus menopause, I'm going to look at my notes for a second. Well, she said a couple things. So she said that the main benefits were really about being artistic, that it's an outlet with like an infinite variety of options and combinations to choose from.
We have to be in our creative to be happy.
Absolutely. And we talked a little bit earlier about the spectrum of ADHD. Some folks are a little bit more rigid thinking who also have it. And that's code words for maybe being on the autism spectrum.
Exactly, both.
So in that respect, because there are patterns,
Ah.
there are all these infinite choices. So you can fill that side, but there's explicit instructions. So it allows somebody that's more of a rigid thinker to follow the pattern with the suggested materials. Conversely, though, is that in relation to ADHD, though, Dr. Clark said that there's some really good neuroscience on the benefit of daily meditation and quieting our inner voices, right? That overthinking, that cycling, which promotes focus and concentration, code words for ADHD. And she considers knitting to meditative. And I do too. And that's another thing that I've written patterns before specifically, and it's something that I would like to build out, in the future, maybe as part of a book along with information where there are certain patterns, knit one, purl two, knit one, purl two, knit one, purl two, like front post, back post crochet, like front post, single crochet, front post, like the repeating in your head that you can do can give you sort of that same rhythm that maybe a chant would. Only we're not going to be interested in that because our hands wouldn't be busy then.
Yes.
It's that gives you two things to do at once.
So it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Which reduces cortisol because by doing this, you're creating this meditative kind of flow state.
That's absolutely what Dr. Clark said, and she said that the smooth, repetitive movements offers a sense of calm and peace, and they let your mind focus on the movement so that you can shut everything else out. And that enjoyment causes a release of dopamine.
Yep.
What do we have a shortage of?
Yeah.
Team ADHD. There she is. And so that then gives you a sense of well-being. It's so simple, but it's also exciting. And it makes me want to go share this and speak at completely unrelated places, at doctors' conferences, at corporate environments, at places where there's a lot of stress. Entrepreneurs are almost always on the ADHD spectrum, it turns
Yeah.
out, because of the big thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's this tool to keep the ideas flowing, but a little more focused because your hands are doing something else, it's way more exciting and interesting than a fidget spinner. And you have something positive and beautiful that you're putting out into the world, even if it's just 2 rows, right?
Absolutely. Did she say anything about the fact that you're using 2 hands and how that lights up both hemispheres of the brain?
She did not, because I didn't specifically, this was all over, messages.
Uh-huh.
But I did talk to a therapist a few years ago. I had a show, it's still on YouTube and Roku, called The Knit Show. And in a segment, I interviewed a psychotherapist, Chelsea DeCroif, and she talked about, it was more focused on mindfulness. But she really talked about the different hemispheres of the brain, the creativity versus the linear thinking, and how they can sort of come together when you're repeating a pattern, but also accessing something that's creative. I don't feel qualified to talk much deeper about it yet, but this is something that is exciting to me and that I plan on digging deeper in. And I think now that we're talking about it, there will be more conversations. There will be more studies, or a study, more studies,
Just one. We just want one. However, Vickie, I believe that most women with anxiety have ADHD that underlies it.
Really.
Because I have never met someone with ADHD who doesn't also have some element of anxiety. Maybe it's subclinical, but doesn't it make sense if you're never sure when your good brain, cooperative brain is going to show up from the time you're little, that it's going to make you anxious. So I think those are all interconnected. And the little that I do know is that when you're operating with 2 hands for anything, that's why I like music, right? Like a guitar or the piano, that what it's doing is you're using both sides of your brain. And then because of that, your memory, it helps your memory, it helps your attention. What you just said, cognitive flexibility. And so I think that's why, all of these things where you're using both hands can feel so grounding because they're actually rewiring your brain.
And different subject, but same, helps when you're going through perimenopause, when you're dealing with brain fog. All of this dexterity, creating dexterity, focus on particular things, all of this are key to helping simmer and settle. Those are opposite things, but they're not when you have ADHD on top of it.
Well, especially because you're saying it's meditative. So you're getting out of your head. I find this with puzzling. I don't know. Somehow I can't focus, like my head, all that noise shuts down when I'm working a puzzle because I have to be focusing on the shapes, and where it fits
You
in.
don't get bored?
I love puzzles. It's something that I've always liked it. They have to be a certain kind of puzzle though. Like my favorite are the New Yorker covers because
Mm-hmm.
they're really hard. And again, because of my mom who taught me how to sew. So that was probably my main interest, was sewing. I remember being 8 years old and I don't know, I loved summer school. That was my favorite. because we could take all these crafty classes. And I took a sewing class and I made a swimsuit and a cover up. And I still remember I had to model it in, their fashion show of everything that kids made. It just gave me such a, it was just all positive emotion because that sense of accomplishment. But what I'm trying to say is that I have horrible visual spatial anything. Like I get lost all the time.
Is that part of it?
Yeah.
Is the reason that I walk out of my hotel room every time and face the wrong direction?
Yeah. We all have different brains, but like cows, they say if you look at cows, they're always going to be pointing north. And humans have that kind of radar inside them, GPS inside of themselves as well. I didn't get
I
it.
don't. I do not.
But Vickie, I know patterns and shapes, and I really believe it's because I sewed as a child. And so putting patterns together, like that is cake for me. But I think it's because I trained my brain. But then the other part of it, and I'm sure it's different, I know it's different parts of, visual spatial skills or aptitude, but getting lost, oh my heavens. Or in nature, like in parks, I always get lost because there are no landmarks. Everything looks the same. I have no idea where I am.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's fascinating. It's interesting what you said about that sense of accomplishment because next to me, and people that are listening aren't going to see it, but I'm going to show you and then I'll talk about it. So I'm showing a picture of a dress that I made when I was maybe 4 or 5.
Oh my heavens.
It's just I literally traced around another doll dress and then there's very big like hand stitches and I have like a little piece of lace at the collar. It's polyester, so that'll tell you it's probably in the 70s. And I framed it when I found it. My mom kept it.
Oh my God, that is the cutest thing.
Thank you.
So how did you sew that? On a machine?
No, no, no. Look at these stitches. They're big hand.
Oh, okay. So you actually stitched it by hand. So what Vickie's showing up for those of you not on YouTube, she's showing a hot pink in our brand colors, a hot pink little doll dress, right? That you made when you were 4?
Yeah, 5, 6. I don't know. Actually, I might have been 7. I don't know. I was little. And it sounds like this, you were talking about making a sweater maybe for a boyfriend where the sleeve was too long. That's also like Theo Huxtable's shirt. You remember that episode? This is, for those that are just listening, the sleeve on this, they're asymmetrical, very avant-garde. I framed this because it gave me that sense of accomplishment. And it sounds like you and I both use visual cues to really like move ourselves forward.
Yeah. So, Vickie, what is your number one ADHD workaround? And I know you were just recently diagnosed, but I suspect there has been something that you've been doing, your own strategy, your own system, that at the time you didn't realize why you were doing it that way. But now it's like, oh, well, that's because that works for my ADHD brain.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is bullet points. Like my whole life is done with bullet points.
Do you find that if it wasn't a bullet point and it was a paragraph, that your brain would get caught up in the words and then it wouldn't work?
Sometimes, yeah, but it's almost like reverse for me for writing. Sometimes my brain thinks it too fast and I can't get it out on paper. But if I at least can bullet point it, then sometimes what I can do is then record myself talking about it and then take it back to the page. But also with lists for things that I have to do. Yeah, it's how I write. It's how I get stuff done. It's so basic, but I live and die by the bullet point. So I would say that's the big one. Just using apps for things. I mean, we didn't have those, obviously. Anything visual helps me a lot. I always say probably math would have been easier for me if I'd been taught geometry with quilting and
Yeah.
algebra with knitting.
Yeah.
You know, that would have probably changed my whole educational trajectory. So I think everything we've been talking about, I've been using as survival skills for ADHD. I just didn't know it until the age of 51.
Well, between you and me, so I went on your Instagram before we actually set up this interview, and I'm going through your interview. I thought you were like 35. So, hey.
You just made my whole day. You just made my whole day. Thank you.
So, Vickie, where can people find you if they want to know more about you and what you do? Because literally I could talk to you all day. but we don't have all day.
We do not. So let's do it. They can always go to VickieHowell.com. They can find me on Instagram and Facebook, just at Vickie Howell. You can also join, and you can do that through my website, Stitchwell Social Club. It's my brand new community. It's a little noisy out there right now on the big socials.
Yeah.
Come in, stitch for a spell there as well. And then you can pre-order my latest book, No Needles Knitting. This is really sort of a follow-up to a 10-year-old book for finger knitting for little kids. So this is more for 20-somethings that are ready to create their own outfits, move into their first apartments, really sort of like, and also utilize their hands while their minds are wild. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of kids in my life that also have ADHD.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. What I have seen recently is all these younger people knitting, like 20-year-olds,
Yeah.
all over the place. They're sitting on park benches. They're waiting, at the DMV, and they
Yeah.
are knitting.
Yeah.
In fact, didn't I see a statistic that it was a very high percentage of 30-year-olds that were knitting, and it was really high. I was shocked, actually.
Yeah. During COVID, especially. It was just like the sourdough bread phenomenon, right? It's like people wanted to be, it's like you want to get back to your roots. You want to have control over something. You want to see something physically manifested. So that's part of it. Yeah. Yeah. Something pretty.
Thank you so much for spending time with us here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your book. It helped me a lot. And thank you
Oh,
for taking the time with me.
I love hearing that. Thank you again. So that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Vickie, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you here next week.